So welcome to our presentation. What I first want to ask is, has anybody had an assessment that is so obscure, so difficult to understand, that you look at it and you cannot get past the words on the page? Well, my name is Amanda, and Rosro and my colleague, we from the Academic Language and Learning Success Program at Charles Darwin University. And every day we step into the shoes of students trying to grapple with assessments that they find stupefying, that they do not understand. To identify the areas that are causing the problems and then to help students understand the assessments, we have developed two interrelated frameworks. We have developed these frameworks based on the theoretical understanding of best practice in assessment, as well as the collective knowledge of the ALLSP students. Thanks, Joanne. I'm glad you reported, and all of you. I'm glad that all of you have the same problems, because this is where Ros and I have been trying to solve a problem. So not only are the frameworks used to assist students, but they're also used as a means of building relationships with the subject coordinators. In Australia, we call or at Charles Darwin, the coordinators actually look after the whole subject. And we work across the university, and also this helps with professional development, because by helping them with their assessment practices, we are helping to reduce frustration with the assessments, and hopefully this will lead to an improved experience for both the student and the lecturer. The method we've employed to design the framework is based on grounded theory. The assessments were coded and the most problematic areas were taken and the framework was designed. Today the presentation is to give you a bit of background to the project by describing the development of the frameworks that we use to assess assessments and how we came to the purpose, meaning and alignment. Then we are going to demonstrate how these frameworks have been applied to a single case study.
And that's where I come in. So I'm just going to start by giving you a bit of background to how this whole project came about and how the framework development was initiated. We see students on a daily basis, and across one semester we conducted 371 one-on-one consultations, and what we found that they were from 80 recurring units or subjects, depending on the terminology, how you refer to them. And we saw that they were always coming with very similar problems. They didn't understand how to approach the task, understand the requirements or what was expected, or the structure of the assessment. So what we did, we contacted lecturers to offer support in some way. And in some cases, we had lecturers contact us knowing that the students were having problems with the assessment, although that's often a less common thing to have the lecturers contact us. So from these 80 units, we were able to get buy-in from 11 academics to go into their units and implement what we've called a just-in-time workshop. Now, when we talk about just-in-time, we're talking about 2 to 3 weeks before the assessment is due, that we come in and clarify some of the issues relating to the assessment. And you'll see in a few minutes when we unpack the two frameworks how we use that as a tool to design it with the lecturer, which was often helpful in sort of not letting them feel like they were being attacked for their assessment design or problems that students were having with the assessment, but as a real professional development strategy for everyone. So of these 11 workshops that we conducted, it was made available to 567 students. So they were able to get help and clarification through these workshops on their assessments. Now, of these 567, 209 completed voluntary surveys to give feedback on how well they thought that just-in-time workshop was. So that was just over 41% of students responded. Overall, we had a strikingly positive feedback that it really did help them improve their understanding of the task. The workshop was relevant to their needs, they got more confidence, and they knew where to go for support and also that their lecturer had some confidence in that. So that gives you a bit of context as to how this whole idea of needing to develop something systematic to deal with problematic assessments has come from. So that's the background, and now Amanda's going to step right into that first framework. So how do we actually come up with a structured way to assess?
So when we looked at this, the themes that were recurring as we showed you in the survey, we found that 3 areas constantly came up as problems. These were purpose, meaning, and alignment. And once we'd unpacked it, we discovered there were other sub-areas that seemed to have a problem. What type of text do we have to use, or what genre is in the assessment, and how does this link to what is expected of the students to achieve at the end, the outcomes? But the first thing, the reason we've chosen purpose is, why do we assess students? And do our students know why we're going to assess them? So the first pillar in the framework is purpose, because as with anything we do, any instruction we are given, if we do not know why we do it, it's difficult to engage in it. And one of the key principles of assessment is that students need to know the purpose of the assessment. Also, with assessments, an important purpose is to know how what we are being asked to do links with what we want to achieve. With university, the unit or the subject outcomes. Another area the students often do not know the why of, what they're being asked to do, is the purpose of the text type or the genre. Academic language comprises of multiple texts that are embedded in the disciplinary practices. The purpose of why we are expected to write a certain type of assessment is important. For example, a business student, they're often asked to write reports. This is because one day when they're finished with the unit, they're going to be asked to write reports in business. Therefore, we get students to deliver a report. Another example, I suppose, is reflective writing. In Australia, nursing and education students specifically are often asked to write reflective practices. Students may not realize that in the everyday practice of nursing or teaching, whatever they're in, reflection is required. Once students understand the purpose of the assessment, they become clear on why they are expected to do it. Another subgenre, another area that we look at in our framework is what we call the rubric or the marking criteria. What is going to be assessed? And we look at, does this assess the students on why they are undertaking the assessment? And have they got the text type clearly in there, and is that being assessed? So after purpose, we move on to meaning. As we all know, we see it constantly, and I do it in my own writing. Often we have a word that has different meanings, but we attach a meaning to it. Assessments need to be clear and understandable. The words that are used in the assessment need to be clearly selected for the actual practices in that field of learning. So I want to return to that question I started with at the beginning of the presentation. Have you seen assessments that are ambiguous, that you do not understand what the meaning is? Absolutely, thank you, Michael. And if you get something you don't understand, how can you engage in it? How can we expect students to engage when they don't understand what they're meant to be answering? So the pillar meaning in the framework questions the meaning and clarity of the assessment. Thank you, Mandy. I'm glad in London you also have the same problem we do in Darwin. So in Australia, we have the Sydney School of Language, and Halliday and Martin from the Systemic Functional Linguistics Can you hear me now, Michael? Yes, I'm back. Sorry about that. Obviously a glitch on our system. As I said, our internet isn't always the fastest here in Darwin. I apologize for that. So I'm not sure where I lost you, but I just wanted to say that we try and get students to understand the meaning of the text types, because we help them then to become almost professionals in the field when they walk into the workplace. If they can understand that the meaning of a report, the meaning of an essay, the meaning of a reflective journal, they will be able to practice. It helps them move on to their field to become professionals. The next pillar is alignment, which I find one of almost the most important things that we find lacking so often. A good assessment must advance student learning. In other words, assessments must align with the outcomes or what we expect students to be able to do because of the learning experience. In alignment, we look at whether the assessment aligns to the unit outcomes, then whether the text type is aligned to what is expected of the student, and how the assessment itself actually relates to the question. And, of course, if the required outcomes have been outlined in the assessment. What do we want students to actually achieve in the assessment? So now we get on to the fun part, the actual assessing assessment framework. So as I said, the assessing assessment framework is based on 4 principles of assessments. It needs to advance student learning. The practices must be communicated clearly to students and to staff, which is quite important. This includes the individual task marks, what we call, as I say, the rubric or the marking criteria. Is this explicitly explained? In the assessment, it needs to be valid and fair, so clearly articulated, because if it's not clearly articulated, it loses its validity, and it needs to be aligned with what we're expecting students to achieve. Assessment practices, one of the reasons we find this quite valuable is we know that assessment practices need to be updated continuously, and this framework is a fantastic professional development opportunity. This framework that we're going to be looking at now, it's a fluid document. It's definitely not static. And although at this stage it is a document that we are already using at CDU to assess assessments or to assist the lecturers to reword their course or unit assessments, especially where they're going through reaccreditation, it's something that we want to improve constantly. So if there is any feedback, we really will take it on board. So this is the framework we developed. As you can see, it's got the 4 pillars in, and this is used specifically to get, we've constructed it to get consistency in approach to lecturers. Because we believe that by having a standard instrument to use where we can highlight problems with the assessment, or let's say rather areas where the assessment could be improved, we're not going in and the lecturers aren't thinking we're coming in specifically to talk to them about a problem. They realize we're coming in with this instrument that is being used across the university. We give it to our lecturers and course coordinators so that they can, when they've designed the assessments or are busy designing assessments, they can use this and see if the assessments match. As I mentioned earlier, it's based on the common themes that emerged when students presented themselves to ALLSP, or Academic Language and Learning Success Program. And these are the elements that continuously emerge. We don't understand why we're doing it. We don't know what they mean by this. We don't know how it links to what we're meant to be achieving. So, from this, the major themes that we coded, we then looked at how can we actually ask questions relating it, and that's where the sub areas come in. What is the purpose? And does the assessment ask students or show students what the purpose is? Can students understand why they are undertaking this assessment? Then, of course, is this task related to what we're expecting them to achieve? And have we told the students that? Now, I've got here, is the purpose of the genre in the criteria? Or is the purpose of the genre first specified? Genre in this is the text type. Is it a report? Is it an essay? Is it a reflective writing, a literature review? What are we expecting students to do? And then, of course, do students know why they're expected to do it? When we moved on to meaning, it was all about clarity. Are there any ambiguous words? And this comes from the students. They say, but we can understand this in many different ways. Do they understand what the genre means? What we have seen, and it may just be unique to our institution, but the assignment or the assessment will call for a report or an essay. But when it comes to the marking criteria, the students are being marked on the other one. So if they're asked in the assessment to do a report, in the marking criteria it says this essay or marks for an essay. So these are things, just little areas that we try and look at in our framework. And then we look at the marking criteria. Is that clear? Is the meaning clear of what they are being tested on? And is it, of course, has everything been put in there? Of course, alignment, as I said, that is one of the most important. Is the assessment aligned to the outcomes that is expected? Why are they doing this assessment? As I've explained, that if you're doing business, you need to be able to write a report. Does the text type link to what the student is expected to achieve? Are they being asked to write an essay when it should be a report? If there is a title to the essay, does it actually link to the task? Are the outcomes aligned in the marking criteria, or are the students being assessed on what the course actually requires? One of the very, very first assessments that we the first one we received was the health assessment. We were already grappling with it, not understanding what the students were expected to do, when the unit coordinator actually contacted us and said she didn't know what the problem was, but all the students were complaining to her that they did not know what was expected. So we took our framework and we went and sat with her, and we got her and with us to look at this. And we discovered that this assessment did not give a clear purpose. Its meaning was there were so many ambiguities in about what they were expected to achieve. And then, of course, we couldn't ascertain how it aligned to the outcomes. When this happened, we were able to highlight to her where the problems were. But that wasn't enough. It doesn't help that you just highlight problems in assessment and then say, go away. We had to actually help her because the assessment cannot be changed. It's published. So we needed to do something. So the lecturer and I'm going to call it the learning lecturer or the academic language and learning advisor needed to devise a plan together to help students engage in the assessment.
So that's where I come in when we're talking about how do we engage students in assessment. If an assessment is so challenging that a student doesn't know how to approach it from the outset, we're not going to be able to fully engage them in the assessment. They often go, "Oh, there's no purpose to this, miss. Why should I even bother attempting the assessment? If I don't understand it, it obviously has no relevance." And then we also need to make sure that the level of challenge for our assessment also matches the level for the students. So if we're asking a first year student in their first semester of uni to write a 5,000 word literature review, that challenge is so high. If that's the expectation that you must give your first year students, well, then we have to implement some sort of significant support strategy to ensure that we're not throwing out that challenge support balance. So that's where we need to have a complementary framework. We've identified all the sort of deficits in terms of purpose, meaning, and alignment within the assessment. We know where we can target just in time to rectify it, but what level of challenge do we need for the assessment, and what type of support can the lecturer give by altering their assessment or not being able to alter it in many cases we have established, and where can academic language and learning advisors give that just-in-time support to try and give us a really good balance for that. So this really is informed by Amanda's assessing assessment framework to make sure that we implement a strategy that matches the student level that we're targeting. So again, we're following on with the same health case to show you how the two frameworks complement each other. So what you're seeing is a whole lot of words on the page, which I'm going to explain. We see high challenge, low academic language and learning support, high challenge task with high support, a low challenge task with low academic language and learning support, and then a low challenge task with high academic language and learning support. What we really want, and this is what all the literature says, is we want a high challenge task that's matched with commensurate high challenge support. So we get students engaged in the task, but we're not babying them or anything. We're giving them the optimal amount of support that we need for that particular level. So a high challenge task with high support for a first year level, you might see some significant type of scaffolding given. But a high challenge task with high support at a postgraduate coursework level, you'd see a very different level of support given. So it's all a matter of identifying the right support. So when I'm referring to that high challenge, high support task, this diagram I'm showing you is the academics perspective. So we see that if it's a high challenge task and low support, lecturers are getting frustrated with their students. You know, they're just copying, pasting, they're plagiarizing, they're not interested in the task. I can't get them to give a original response. Students are dropping out of my course left, right, and center. I've got ridiculous amounts of academic misconduct cases to deal with. And this is often because we're not reaching that engagement level. So we often see that, you know, the purpose, meaning, and alignment perhaps isn't clear. The assessment weighting, the length and value perhaps don't match the appropriate year level. So if we're giving a first year, first semester student a 60% 3,000 word literature review, that weighting in that year level often comes quite problematic for a student. So it's all about finding that optimal balance. So we really want to have the lecturers feel empowered, like what they're teaching content-wise is really engaging for their students. And the reality is the content probably is really interesting, but applying it to the assessment is what they find really challenging. So we really want to help them transform their assessment and consequently improve engagement. And of course, we're always hoping for improved academic integrity. On the flip side, of course, we never want the students to feel dumbed down. So we've got to really ensure that we don't just think of academic language and learning support as this scaffolding. Okay, there is levels of scaffolding, and that's what we've got to make sure that we're dealing with. It's appropriate to the type of assessment and the year level. So if we then go, okay, we've identified what students and academics are feeling, and we know that the assessment perhaps is, in this case, it was high challenge, low support. So what we see is that the Assessing Assessment Framework has helped us pinpoint the 5 areas that we really need to do something with before this assessment is due for the students. So the 5 features: that the task doesn't have a purpose, the rationale's given but it doesn't contextualize what the students need to do, there's no outcomes, there was 3 rubrics for 1 task, no indication of how students will be given marks, and of course no alignment to the outcome. So we use the first framework to go, okay, this is what we really need to address to move it from a high challenge, low support into a high challenge, high support. So then we go to, well, what strategies could we do to move it into that high challenge, high support? So we decided that the best thing to do was explain the purpose of the task and contextualize that within a student-guided activity. We then explain the genre of a reflective essay. In this case, it was decided to stick with the 1 genre and clarify that and explain how this structure worked. Okay, then 1 rubric needed to be given, not 3. So we revised the rubric and it was linked to the new genre and the new outcomes for the student. And then we explained how the learning outcomes fitted around the assessment with some activities within the on-campus and online workshop. So that was the intention of the 5 key strategies to move it into that high challenge, high support. So we knew what the students are having issues with, the lecturer acknowledged that in their assessment, and then we come in and deal with that. And that gives us what we would call a just-in-time. So that has to be delivered 2 to 3 weeks before the assessment is due. But in reality, just-in-time is not necessarily the best strategy for it. We want to be dealing with these issues, rectifying that with their assessment. So when it comes to students coming in fresh for a semester, perhaps the assessment is so well designed that the level of support in that challenge support framework is very minimal. We're just there as a go-to if needs be, rather than really coming in to support and scaffold and repeat business for us. We'd really like to just target additional students that need that support. So that gives us the idea of, we know what just-in-time is in it, we know it works for that, but we want to roll it out in terms of a university-wide process as a professional development tool for academics, but also we've just got buy-in for a couple of education and nursing schools to do it in their re-accreditation process of their courses, so they can deal with these issues in assessment that students have flagged, we've flagged, and roll out some really clear assessment that has clear purpose, meaning, and alignment, and the support to match it. So what we find is that if they are able to redesign and rework these problematic aspects of their assessment, the assessment task itself can actually become the artifact or the conduit for the support, rather than just purely seeing academic language and learning advisors as the only support mechanism. They can actually use their own assessment tasks as their own sort of, I guess, baby or prodigy for transferring that support to the students. Yeah, I'm just going to comment on Mandy's thing because that's really important. I've had the comment before of exemplars for students, and I think that it becomes a really challenging thing because exemplars can border into that over scaffolding where we just give them an example and then we see students feel the need to, they have to sort of replicate it, and it sort of restrains them from having that sort of creativity and flexibility. But if we can set the parameters in other ways for how we design our assessment, we can sort of mitigate the need for that. So yeah, it's a really good point, and I agree. So we've come to that time where we're happy to answer questions. So I'm going to go and join Amanda so you can sort of see us face to face and ask us any questions that you have.
Can you hear us now, Joanne? Sorry, it's one set of headphones and speaker did not work, so we had to get the old ones out, and it has just been quite a challenge, the working with the set of headphones you don't know. So if there are there any other questions that you'd like to ask Ros or myself about our frameworks? Joanne. Oh, are the questions conducted together? Sorry, I thought I'd answered. Must have been when my sound was gone. I apologize. We do work as a team. We try, the lecturers usually want us to work together as a team, so they will be answering the content side. We will unpack the question. We will look at the type of text type that the students need to do. So if it's an essay, we will teach them how to structure an essay or what a report is. But when it comes to content, of course, like any academic advisor, not one of us are content specialists. I'm going to actually let Ros answer the question from you, Michael. One moment.
I'm just doing a change there. Yeah, that's a really interesting question, Michael. Initially, you probably saw from my slides at the beginning, we didn't get much buy-in. Out of 80 lecturers that we contacted, we got 11 buy-in. The fantastic news is that we got buy-in from some heads of school, and they have taken it to their schools, so within the faculties, and the whole school has bought in for these reaccreditation. And the idea that no one likes seeing that there's big numbers of students coming for support with something that could probably be mitigated. So initially, no, we didn't have support, and people thought we were coming in, I guess, as an attack on assessment, but the framework has really helped to sort of be a tool to show that it's more about professional development, and it's evolved for us as well. So that's where it's sort of gone in terms of that. There's obviously some fingers typing. Yeah, I'll give that to Amanda because that's her area.
So I see Joanne and Mandy. I've got two questions. I'll start with Joanne. Who starts the ball rolling? The wonderful thing is initially we thought we would have to, because in our team meetings, when we saw that one assessment was coming in with a number of students with the same problem, we would contact the lecturer. We now found that when the lecturers find that the students are questioning about it, they contact us. So we have both ways. We have the student feedback where we do contact lecturers, but now, if you look at, I wish I could show you our list, it's the lecturers who this semester have been contacting us, hearing about the good work we are doing. We're actually inundated. We're just trying to find out how we're going to support and cope with the numbers. And then Mandy, it's very true. Very often academics are quite precious and there is a lot of professional jealousy. Ros and I do not go in with the we know what we're doing. We go in and say, look here, this is what the students have said to us. If you can clarify, or we work together. Yes, there are a number of lecturers who do perhaps find us almost a threat, or it is professional jealousy. But I think up to now, Ros and I have managed to almost let everyone know we're not coming in as experts in their field, we're coming in as experts in our field. And Jan, yes, it is great. We're seeing a lot of good improvement in our, it's just we have to continue and take into account any feedback we do get. which we do on a regular basis. And that's what we're going to ask everyone out there. If there is something you see and you can give us feedback on our framework, ways we can improve, I think this is an incredible way to open doors, to go in, to start conversations.
I'll just quickly answer your question, Michael, about do we have separate curriculum education developments or do we serve both functions? Yes, there are particular domains within the university that are sort of curriculum education developers, but they've also shown interest and we're sort of working with them when it comes to that sort of unit reaccreditation. That's sort of where we come in and help that. So it's sort of starting to spread, I guess, spread the good word, I guess you could say. So yeah, we're not wearing their hat, we're just sort of, I guess you could say, a consulting party in that sort of aspect. Yeah, Amanda, you can explain that one.
Oh, Mandy, we have that too. We have it quite often. I explained it to them 20 times. How we approach lecturers in that case is that we are the professionals or the experts in explaining how to structure, how to work, where they are very good at content. So I think how we manage them who say, but I explained them to them 20 times, we say, but can we come in with a different perspective and explain our role? We are definitely never get involved in content. So yes, we get that constantly. So, but we do just let them know that we can explain it from our perspective, but not their area. Does that make sense, Mandy? It's a pleasure. Where's the paper being published? I'm going to give you that to Ros to answer this one.
It should be in the Journal of Academic Language and Learning. It should be coming out next week. Yeah, next week. So it's the same title as our presentation today. So for Amanda and I. Can you hear me now? I don't think you heard me. So it's coming out in the Journal of Academic Language and Learning. I believe it's being published next week. We just saw the proofs. Yeah, okay, sorry. Mic difficulties. It's not on there. Sorry, we thought we had put it on the slide, but we must have left it off. Any other questions? Yeah, that's definitely. But I think that it has potential to be modified across continents, institutions, depending on the types of language as well. I mean, even it has slightly different language across Australian universities. So yeah, that's a really good observation. Me too. Can I ask what area you're in, Joanne, to see, just to gauge potential application? That would be interesting. Yeah, okay, regional campus. Yeah, so CDU is a regional campus as well, so that's interesting. I'm guessing you have a very, very diverse cohort of students, which was obviously a big factor for us when we were finding these recurring issues across a diverse cohort as well. So yeah, that's really interesting. I think it would differ varying to the cohorts as well. Oh yeah. Amanda's going to talk to that one.
Joanne, what we have found is that no matter which institution it is, in Australia, when we presented this framework, even our top 8 would come and say, but this is a problem we're having in our own institution. I think the big thing is lecturers know their content. They are brilliant at it, but they don't understand. Students don't understand what's being asked. So congratulations on being back in this absolutely fantastic field that we're all in. I'm very glad. I hope we can communicate. Oh, Mandy, yes. Our biggest cohort is nursing. Yeah, and that is a never-ending demand. I agree with you. We have it all the time. And social work is another very big unit that we have found. I'm actually looking at the board of how many of our nursing units have contacted us since we started with our framework, and I think I'm just looking at our board. I think we're delivering in 15 nursing units for semester 1. So we're hoping that it's just going to grow and that we will be able to assist to remove the problem of assessments in the future.
Yeah, that's a big one. It sounds like our universities are eerily similar. CDU feeds directly from vet, so we do see that as well. And that impacts the type of students coming through with this type of assessment they've dealt with, and the expectation shifts quite dramatically. So yeah, very, very similar, obviously, the institutions, and we can completely relate to that. It is, and I think that sometimes we often get put in our sort of, not only our institutional silos, but our, continent silos, and think that it's probably only happening to us, but it's really good to see that we're all sort of fighting the same assessment battle.
That's very clever, yes. To find it at the bottom in the morning. Absolutely. But we believe we're going to win this battle, Joanne. I hope you can hear me. But and you know what? We'll keep rolling it up because it's the students that matter. Amanda, you used to also work in embedding literacy. Phone's on. In education, we found that we have really had to work hard to get our program up and running, and it's only through, I'd say, a very collaborative approach and building the relationships that we've managed to get into education. So I think that working with education is very, very valuable.